You're listening to Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty. As the presidential election heads into its final weeks, you're probably seeing a torrent of campaign ads, memes, and political headlines on your social media. There's a lot of misinformation swirling around online too. And after back-to-back hurricanes, misinformation is also spinning up around natural disasters, from how storms are formed to disaster recovery. When your social media feed is jammed with images and headlines about political candidates and storm victims, how can you tell what's real and what's fake? In about 10 minutes, you'll hear from Mahadevan, Director of MediaWise at Poynter. He'll share tips on the impact of misinformation and how to spot it. But first, Hurricane Milton made landfall nearly 2 weeks ago, and for some, the disaster isn't over. Flooding is still causing big problems after the storm dumped more than a foot of rain in some parts of the greater Tampa Bay area. In Pasco County, retired firefighter Douglas Woods got half a foot of water in his Land O'Lakes home after nearby Cypress Creek overflowed.
So I moved here in '94, May of '94, and I've had water in my garage a couple of times. So this is by far the worst that I've ever seen. There's nothing to compare it to. We were sandbagging. I blew we tarped that roof down there. We sandbagged everybody we could sandbag. We were running sandbags all day. We did everything we could possibly. I mean, there's nothing else we could have done. It's just absolute. There's nothing else we could have done.
And in Hernando County, the Withlacoochee River is just starting to go down, but it's going to take some time for floodwaters to recede. David DiCarlo, you're the emergency manager for Hernando County. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hurricane Milton dumped a lot of rain on its way through the Tampa Bay region nearly 2 weeks ago, and much of it is still kind of making its way through the river system. We're recording this on Monday, 21st of October, and in some places, rivers are still at dangerous levels. So what about the Withlacoochee River? How does that look this week?
So over the weekend, we reached crest at approximately 19 feet, 19.8 at Trilby. We got up to 13 feet in the area of Croom, which is on the northern end of our county. Trilby is south end, closer to the Pasco-Hernando line. And the levels that we've seen at Trilby, we haven't seen since the early 1930s.
Wow.
In Croom, we haven't seen that type of flooding since 1960. So it's pretty historic. A lot of people who live along the river have not seen that type of flooding and just didn't expect it was going to get that high. Even though the gauges and the forecast said it was going to get up there, I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of areas that they didn't think would flood, ended up flooding. There's several lakes within that area of Ridge Manor in Hernando County by the Trilby gauge that began to flood. A number of houses are underwater. Some neighborhoods are just inundated. The roads are inundated. Their houses may be fine, but ingress and egress into their neighborhoods is just far exceeds what a vehicle can get through. So we're still dealing with that. However, it is receding. Today's numbers this morning was 19.3, and up at Croom it was just under 13 feet. It's 12.8 or something. But it's forecast to slowly recede over the next several weeks. So there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Now, you mentioned Croom, you talked about Ridge Manor, Brooksville's another name I've heard. Are there some other communities you're worried about too, particularly along that river?
There's several little different areas of pockets, within the Ridge Manor community area. There's Talisman Estates, some other neighborhoods. All those have been affected. U.S. Highway 301 at the county line of Hernando and Pasco ended up getting closed because the river just inundated that section of 301. We had to close that. There were some areas near Cortez Boulevard that was, water got over it that we've never seen before. So again, it's a learning experience for not only the residents but our response. I think though we had a great plan in place. We do have pods, and we opened up a nice little comfort station at Ridge Manor Community Park so people can take advantage of that. We understand people are hurting and they need commodities such as water, MREs. We have a shower, bathroom, laundry trailer available. We also have some state representatives and FEMA representatives there at Ridge Manor Community Park to help those individuals register for FEMA assistance. We have comfort stations at the south end of the county on the west end for Arapica residents. And then we have another one at the old R Beach property on Shoreline Boulevard for Hernando Beach residents. So we're dealing with two different storms. So, it's a precarious situation. We're still in response for one storm, and we're still in recovery in the other storm, and they're now overlapping.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of things I wanted to clarify, pods and MREs. Can you just explain what those two things are?
Sure. Yeah, the pods is a point of distribution. It's a place where we have food, MREs, ready to eat meals, and then we have water. Okay, we're giving out cases of water and MREs to those that are affected. A pod is just you stay in the car and you go through the line, and a volunteer will have your trunk open, and volunteer will place the items in your trunk, shut your trunk, and you move on. Mm-hmm. So that's at the Ridge Manor community park. They're also at the community park if you want to park, and if you have laundry to do, we set up laundry stations there for people, because we understand a number of homes that got affected, and you just can't do your laundry, or you can't cook your meals. We've set up hot meals at that location as well at the park to help the community. So it's open and available. The comfort stations are open 24 hours.
Are there still shelters open at this point, or is it basically you're doing what you can to help in terms of laundry, hot food, water if you need it, but people are having to find their own places to stay if their homes are underwater?
No, we still have the enrichment center located on John Grubbs Boulevard in Brooksville. That is still open. Again, that's at the enrichment center in Brooksville. That still has people that were seeking public shelter from Hurricane Helene. We have people there from Hurricane Milton, and we have people there from the flood. So again, we got 3 different catastrophes, but we do still have a public shelter open and available. So you can get refuge there at the enrichment center. You'll absolutely get fed. There's also a laundry trailer there as well. So we're trying to meet those accommodations, those basic necessities for the public during these catastrophes.
I've seen quite a lot of footage of sheriff's deputies out and about on sort of flat-bottom boats going house to house if necessary and rescuing people. Is that still something you're having to do, or as these rivers start to slowly come down, are you able to transition out of that?
Well, it depends on how fast the river recedes, but yeah, absolutely. If someone still needs to get rescued or evacuate, we are assisting those evacuees, not only through the sheriff's office, but fire rescue. We've done a number of those evacuees when they call. So they'll call our public information center, which is still open and available from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you have any storm-related questions or flooding questions, you can call 352-754-4083 if you live in Hernando County. Or 911. Call 911 if you need to get evacuated. And we already have water assets in the area, so we can deploy those and get to you as soon as possible.
What do the next few weeks look like? What do you think the priorities are going to be? I mean, obviously that water is going to take a wee while to recede. It may take some time for, I imagine, the full extent of the damage to come into focus. And then, as you mentioned at the start of our conversation, still a lot of storm debris from Hurricane Helene that needs to be picked up and carted away. So how do you prioritize over the next few weeks, what you need to get done?
Well, it's like juggling 4 or 5 balls in the air and make sure they all stay in the air and you don't drop any. So, a number of different departments have stepped up and taken control of different priorities. For instance, our Department of Public Works is taking care of our the contractors for debris pickup and debris monitoring. So that is continuing and ongoing. Our utilities and building departments, they're still monitoring the water systems and doing damage assessments on the west side. But we really can't do damage assessment on the east side until the water recedes. So that's just a whole nother process, and we're just going to keep that in that cycle, continue to do our damage assessment with what we can in the areas that we gain access to, and continue that damage assessment as the water recedes and we can gain access further and further into those neighborhoods to make the proper damage assessment to help, not only the citizens, but, collect that data for us for emergency permitting, any emergency work or anything of that nature. Not only that, when the water recedes, we still have people or residents will have to be cutting out drywall and renovating their homes, and that's just more debris that's going to have to be picked up. So we're going to have our East Side Convenience Center for garbage or construction debris that's going to be open. The problem is that right now, the last I heard, that the water came up to our East Side Convenience Center and we had to turn the power off. So we're trying to make alternative measures to get either large dumpsters or find another location to put that debris because people just have just regular refuge, that they normally have on a day-to-day basis, and this now is compiling up and up and up because the garbage trucks just can't get in that area. So we're trying to do everything we can to assist and meet those demands that the public needs. Basic services. That's what government does. Public safety is paramount. Life safety is paramount and number one. Luckily, we haven't had any fatalities within Hernando County itself from either of these storms, and I really am very proud of that. I hope to continue working very closely with Coochie River Electric. They're going individual house by house within the flooded areas, pulling meters individually as they see fit to make sure that the electrical systems, if they're compromised, that they're rendered safe. So when the power does come back on, it doesn't start any fires. So it's a absolutely collaborative, collective effort from all of our partners and nonprofits.
And could you just remind us the number, or remind our listeners the number to call if they need help in the Hernando County area, one you mentioned earlier?
So our Public Information Center is open. It's from 8 to 5 daily, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. That number is 352-754-4083. Again, 352-754-4083. You can call that number to get any services or any information. They'll refer you, or they'll be able to answer your questions there on the phone. If you need evacuation still, you can call 911. That'll go straight to our dispatch center at the Hernando County Sheriff's Office, and they'll make arrangements for water access to come get you and evacuate you out of the area. So again, but if you have any storm-related questions, please use our Public Information Center. Do not call 911. Understand, if you do have an emergency and you're in a flooded area, response times may be delayed just because of the water, that we can't get emergency services into you. We'll have to get to you by boat or another type of water asset. So just be prepared for that.
David DiCarlo, Emergency Manager for Hernando County. Thank you so much for that update. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
And you can find more reporting about the ongoing recovery from Hurricanes Milton and Helene on WUSF.org. You're listening to Florida Matters. Coming up, whether it's politics or storm recovery, there's a lot of misinformation swirling on social media platforms. You'll hear some insights on how to tell fact from fiction up next. You're listening to Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty. It's been a bruising election campaign and a brutal hurricane season. And your nerves may be frayed. You might be looking for reassurance or answers. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation swirling about on social media. A lot of it's driven by politics, AI, and the rumor mill. And a lot of that misinformation is preying on people's vulnerability. Can you spot what's real and what's fake amid the images of politicians and storm victims cascading through your social media feed? Well, here to help is Alex Mahadevan. He's the director of MediaWise at Poynter. Alex, you told us back at the beginning of summer that the problem with AI is that it puts the power in everyone's hands to become a political operative and potentially flood the zone of AI-generated images and text aimed at trying to influence people. How much has changed in the last 4 months, and how much more sophisticated has AI-generated imagery become?
Well, unfortunately, I was right in my thoughts that I really thought that people would start using AI-generated images more often. We're seeing lots more of them. The technology is getting a lot better, so it's a lot harder to spot these AI images. But honestly, what I've seen is the biggest shift has been in the people who are sharing these images and how they feel about them. Specifically, they don't care that they're AI generated. That is the big thing that has worried me the most. So we're seeing the zone flooded with AI-generated content, and people are sharing it because it supports what they think about the world.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk about some recent examples of those images that have popped up recently on social media in the last few months following Hurricane Helene. There was a flurry of these images that emerged as North Carolina grappled with catastrophic flooding. And there's a few variations on a child wearing a life jacket and clutching a puppy. So both of these images depict a clearly distraught child wearing a life jacket, sort of clutching a bedraggled puppy. There's obviously flooding in the background. And these are really evoking quite a kind of passionate response from people. What's your takeaway from the images, Alex, and the people's reaction online?
Well, the thing that disturbed me is that there were plenty of images that came out of Appalachia following Hurricane Helene that showed people's anguish. There were homes and businesses washed away. My favorite town in the entire world, Chimney Rock Village, was half gone. Yet for some reason, the images that seemed to go the most viral, that seemed to stir the most emotion, were these AI generated images. Now, I think part of it was it is a little girl and it is a puppy just looking sadder than you could ever imagine. Now, that there weren't any images, that came out of the disaster that looked exactly like that because there weren't photographers who were, waiting around getting right in people's faces. So I can see why people shared it because it is something that just absolutely punches you in the gut. And if you're not thinking about it and you don't look closely to see that, it looks a little too computerized, then you might share it. Now, the thing about the image is like I totally understand wanting support for victims of this, but by sharing fake images, all you're doing is making it harder for real victims to to get their story out there.
So that's kind of coming back to that notion you're talking about of flooding the zone. There's obviously fake images that are clearly fake. I mean, I think this might have been generated kind of as a response of tongue in cheek to some of those other fake images that we saw, which were supposedly, quote unquote, out of the flooding in North Carolina. So, even though this image, Alex, looks fake, it's a child that looks pretty cool about being on the back of an alligator clutching this puppy. What impact does that have on the general ecosystem of AI imagery floating around? You have this kind of wash of images. Some of them look more real than others, but what's the kind of overall impact of all of this?
Well, ultimately, it sort of cheapens real art and it cheapens real images that show real joy or real pain. I the image was post Milton and it was in response. It was sort of a joke, like, look at how many idiots I can get to share this. But what happens is when you see this tit for tat AI generated image for AI generated image, what you're left with is this sort of like slime-like false reality that we're seeing on social media that it might be funny, but it's not really humorous that our reality is being completely supplanted by artificial intelligence.
Let's talk a little bit about politics too, because we are seeing an awful lot of political images making headlines, and Elon Musk has shared a few on the site that he owns, X, formerly Twitter, including an image that appears to show Kamala Harris addressing a communist rally. So, Alex, this image was also shared by Donald Trump. There's also a bogus Kamala Harris campaign ad with AI-generated voiceover. Even when AI-generated images and videos are pointed out as fake, can they sway someone's opinion about a candidate or an election?
Absolutely. I think the point of these AI-generated images is, well, it's not necessarily to sway someone's opinion. I think what it is to confirm someone's existing opinion. So for example, with the Kamala Harris communism rally that is AI generated, that might be seen by a lot of maybe moderate Republicans. But they see that, and part of them is like, oh, I keep seeing all these commercials about her being a socialist. Now I see this image, and it's like, oh, okay, that completely confirms it. There's absolutely no way that I would ever want to vote for a communist. So these images, while they do, I think, sway some people, I think the biggest harm in all this AI-generated political content is it's keeping people locked in their polarized unreality because it is not realistic to say that Kamala Harris is a communist or a socialist. However, there's a large swath of people who want to believe that, and they get to believe that if they see an image that looks like this. So they get to live in this false reality. And one thing I want to point out about that image too is if you compare it to the previous one had a little note on it on Twitter that said, this image is AI generated. This image does not have that note. And that's because this community notes fact-checking feature on Twitter completely fails when it comes to political content. So, you see AI generated political images are not getting flagged by fact-checking systems on Twitter. And that's a disappointment too, to me.
Alex, kind of to that point, I mean, do AI-generated media help add weight to conspiracy theories or claims that have their origins in some kind of cynical political point scoring? And, for an example, the debunked claim that Haitian immigrants are eating pets. And there's an image to go with this too. It's one of many, but here's one that shows former President Donald Trump kind of clutching a duck in one hand and a kitten in the other. And this is kind of along the lines of slightly tongue-in-cheek, but sort of joking, but not really, just kind of adding weight to that. How do these images sort of help fit into that narrative of, even if something is, originates in a falsehood, it kind of gains legs and becomes something, has something of its own energy sort of moving forward?
Well, it's like I said about just turning anyone into a political operative. It can turn anyone into a full-fledged conspiracy theorist. I mean, back in the day, you had to listen to what was that radio show? Like Sasquatch and aliens and what have you. But nowadays, anyone can go on and create an image that just adds fuel to the conspiracy fire that whether or not the image looks real or not, if you're seeing, 5,000 images that seem to support this debunked claim about Haitian immigrants eating pets, then that's going to fool a lot of people. It's going to, like I said, keep people locked in that unreality that they've built around themselves. There was a Clemson report that came out either today or yesterday that showed that there are these bots that can fire out, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tweets that are all generated via AI, and that's text, so text and images. It's all about being able to just create a lot of content that supposedly, and people believe, confirms these conspiracy theories, because if they open up Twitter and they see 100 posts in a row that are all saying this claim is actually true, then they might believe it, even though it's false.
Some misinformation that's erupted lately doesn't seem to need any AI to push it along. I mean, the idea that the government, for example, is steering hurricanes towards certain parts of the country, or the pet-eating conspiracy. Now, in the Tampa Bay region, the Pasco County Sheriff has had to do some social media fact-checking on claims that Haitians are being, quote, stored at a business. In fact, the building in question is a special needs shelter. But, I mean, Alex, how easy is it for people to get their bearings on the truth when there is so much misinformation floating around out there?
Well, it's really hard. And I mean, it's so I saw this post, and my first thought was, wow, the Pasco Sheriff's Office probably had to devote a couple hours of however many staff members to go check out, because it said they went and checked it out. Like they had to devote however many hours, however much staff time to debunk this absolutely wild claim made by a completely unhinged person who claims to be a journalist but is a conspiracy theorist. And so it's wasting resources, and it's getting harder to tell fact from fiction because there's just so much of this stuff online. So this guy shared this tweet. It was seen however many thousands of times, I think in the tens of thousands at least when I saw it. And that's already, way past what a debunk can generate, because the Pasco sheriff debunked it, but it was too late. This guy had already done the damage.
Mm-hmm. Another thing you noted, Alex, when we spoke last, there are no guardrails to stop the spread of AI. I mean, one thing I have noticed on social media is that you do get users stepping in to fact check and warn people of misinformation, but how effective can citizen fact checking be?
Honestly, I mean, at least within a community, I think it can be incredibly effective. And when I say community, I mean like in-group fact checking. So here's an example. So I join a lot of wild Facebook groups to monitor misinformation, and I'm in a Facebook group for truckers. And there were a lot of people who were claiming that the government chemtrails were making love bugs die out. So they were saying you see less love bugs on the road because of all these chemtrails. Well, what I started seeing is dozens and dozens of these truckers coming onto Facebook and saying, no, 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 that is absolutely incorrect. I've been driving my truck around for the last 10, 20 years. There are as many love bugs. And then I would click on the profiles of these truckers, and they are far right. They are sharing other conspiracy theories, but they are changing people's minds who are usually, vulnerable to this type of misinformation because they have that lived experience. So I think in-group personal fact checking is incredibly powerful, and that's we're always trying to encourage people to have these conversations with their friends and their family and their colleagues and those in their community, because you can make a difference much more than, the Pasco Sheriff's Office having to come in and debunk something like this.
Alex, what are some tools that people can use to check if an image or a video is fake or if a claim is false?
So unfortunately, there aren't great tools specifically for identifying AI-generated images. What it's all about is trying to answer the question of who posted it, trying to dig into the bio of whoever shared the image. Let's say this person who shared the image of that shelter and made all those claims that were completely false. Now, all I did is I took a few seconds and I did something called lateral reading. I opened up a couple tabs. I searched his name. I searched his business. And I was able to find out that he is a prolific conspiracy theorist. His Instagram was filled with some pretty wild photos, and the things that he said and shared on social media don't indicate that he's an expert or journalist in anything. So lateral reading, opening lots of different tabs and trying to search, cross-check a name, an organization to make sure who's sharing that is an expert. That's honestly one of the most powerful things you can do is before sharing something, making sure what you're sharing was posted by an expert or a legitimate journalist or more importantly, a fact checker. For the AI generated images, what you can do and what I encourage is doing a reverse image search. So there's a tool called Google Lens. If you are using Chrome, it actually pops up in your URL bar to search for an image. And you can search the web by image. And if you see an AI generated image that you think is AI generated, you can do a search on that and it might lead you to an artificial intelligence art community. It might lead you to a fact check that's saying, listen, this image of the little girl and dog is actually AI generated. So there are a couple of tools, but it's all about just being critical of what you see online and not believing something just because it confirms how you feel about the world and what your politics are. So, really thinking, trying to practice intellectual humility. And when you see something that makes you feel like you are 100% right and you've always been right, that's a cue to stop and check it out.
Some good advice there. Alex Mahadevan, Director of MediaWise at Poynter, thank you so much for your time and your insights. That's Florida Matters for this week. Find more insights on the 2024 election on WUSF's podcast, Our Changing State Vote 2024, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch on YouTube. Engineering support from Dave Anderson, Jackson Harp, and Blake Bass. Florida Matters executive producer is Grayson Doctor. I'm Matthew Petty. Thank you for listening.